News, reported by Chet Huntley and David Brinkley.
Senator Edward Kennedy, the only one of the four brothers left alive, went into court today and pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident where a young woman drowned. He got a sentence of 2 months in jail, the sentence suspended, and a year's probation. The judge gave him the minimum jail sentence and suspended that because, he said, Kennedy already had been and would be punished more than anything the court could do to him. Then he left the courtroom in Edgartown on the island of Martha's Vineyard and returned to the Kennedy compound across the bay in Hyannisport. A report from Edgartown from NBC News correspondent Liz Trotter.
The weather was foul, so Senator Edward Kennedy came to Martha's Vineyard by sea on the family yacht. With him were his wife Joan, his brother-in-law Stephen Smith, and his lawyers.
Get the hell out of the way, will you?
Inside the courtroom, Senator Kennedy rose to face Judge James Boyle and the court clerk while the charge was read. "How do you plead?" asked the clerk. Kennedy bowed his head and said softly, "Guilty." Chief of Police Dominic Arena, the man who brought charges against Kennedy, was sworn in. He read to the court a brief version of the events of July 25th, the day Mary Jo Kopechne was killed. Judge Boyle then raised a question. Had there been any attempt to conceal Kennedy's identity? Chief Arena and the county prosecutor said there had been no such efforts. Kennedy, slumped in his chair, kept his head down throughout the 10-minute proceedings. He seemed calm, humble, and ready to accept what the sentence might bring. He was not wearing the neck brace that had been put on him as a result of the accident. Mrs. Kennedy was seated about 20 feet away from her husband. She kept her eyes fixed on him, and now and then she frowned as though struggling to maintain her composure. Senator Kennedy came out of the courthouse, looking even more strained than when he went in.
I have made my plea.
Within minutes after he drove off,
the network
Police Chief Dominic Arena held a news conference.
Make a report to the people of Massachusetts. Thank you very much.
Remember that meeting, Senator? Senator, when will that Within minutes after he drove off, Police Chief Dominic Arena held a news conference.
The sentence is going to raise a lot of criticism about how private citizens are treated and how maybe senators are treated, and that perhaps there might be a difference.
No, I'm not, because for one thing, suspend a sentence is something I wouldn't want hanging over my head, and the other thing is that most first offenders, usually to get a suspended sentence, are usually placed on file.
Senator Kennedy's suspended sentence was granted on the basis of his character and his worldwide reputation. But it's this worldwide reputation that is now the larger question. What can or will he do to preserve his potential as a candidate for President of the United States? This is Liz Trotter, NBC News on Martha's Vineyard.
Kennedy will make a statement on television tonight at 7:30 Eastern Time. It will, of course, be seen live here on NBC. It'll be a statement only, not a news conference. No reporters will be allowed in by his decision, and so no questions will be asked. We have heard speculation on the possibility he might resign from the Senate, but it is only speculation, and we don't know what he will say.
The Huntley-Brinkley Report is produced by NBC News and brought to you in color by new Men & Dry antiperspirant. When you're under pressure, you'll need Men & Dry.
When you're under pressure, you perspire like...
You came home at 4 in the morning.
I told Daddy what you said to Mommy.
Would you get your hair cut?
I don't see how any college will accept you.
Report at once to the dean's office. Report at once to the dean's office.
When you're under pressure, you need Men & Dry. Men & Dry is a new antiperspirant for perspiry, pressured people.
You don't stay out until 4 in the morning.
Men & Dry for men and women. Men & Dry.
On the island of Guam today, President Nixon outlined a new fine line American policy. He said this country must play an important role in Asia, but that his administration will seek a reduction of American military presence there. The president implied that he would attempt to make our presence in Asia one of economic and technical cooperation. while calling on the nations of the area to undertake more of their own military defense. Mr. Nixon went on to say that he seeks a reduction of United States involvement all over the world. For a report on the Presidential News Conference on Guam, here is NBC News correspondent Douglas Kiker.
After welcoming the Apollo 11 astronauts home, Mr. Nixon flew 6 hours across the Pacific to the isolated island of Guam, a U.S. territory, where he and Mrs. Nixon received a warm and enthusiastic welcome. Here on the island before flying on to Manila to begin his conferences with Southeast Asian leaders.
When we come here, when we see this great crowd of people, all of whom are deeply devoted to our country, far across the Pacific, we realize what a great challenge those of us have who are in the positions of leadership to develop the programs that will bring peace and progress to all the world. And particularly we feel that when we see these literally thousands of children here, we want them to grow up in a world of peace.
After the opening ceremony, President Nixon spent almost an hour briefing reporters on his trip. He had a lot to say. The President said the nation's frustrating experience in Vietnam has caused it to re-examine its role in all of Asia. And he made it clear there are going to be some important, even historic changes. The President said that in the next decade, Asia will pose the greatest threat to world peace. So, like it or not, the United States must continue to play a significant role here. He said one big reason he's making this trip is to assure Asian leaders of this. But he also made it clear that he intends to let Asian leaders know that the United States is going to start scaling down its military commitments here. In the future, he said, it will be U.S. policy to avoid the kind of creeping military environment which led to the Vietnam War. In the future, he said, the United States must draw a policy line to avoid becoming involved in the internal affairs of any Asian nation to the point where American troops must be committed. Asian non-communist countries, he said, must learn to take care of their own internal wars. So that's the message the President is bringing with him on this trip, and it's a good one. The United States intends to stick around in Asia, but no more Vietnam. Douglas Kiker, NBC News, with the President on Guam.
At about midnight tonight, Eastern Time, President Nixon will leave Guam for Manila, where his welcome may be mixed. The Philippines are in the midst of a highly provocative presidential election campaign. A report from Richard Hunt in Manila.
All this week, Manila has worn the air of a hostess, making hasty preparations for an unexpected but welcome guest. President Nixon apparently accepted a standing invitation from the Philippines government to drop in for a visit sometime. When he set a date, the Filipinos were pleased, but surprised. The government had to send out platoons of soldiers and sailors to spruce up Rojas Boulevard on the route of the Nixon's motorcade. Tomorrow, these lawns will be covered with government employees who've been ordered to turn out on their day off and greet the visitors. On the campus of the University of the Philippines and other colleges, a different kind of welcome is being prepared. Some students will demonstrate against the Nixon visit.
You believe that President Nixon represents the monopoly capitalist class in the United States, is the representative of American imperialism throughout the world, and he is merely a symbol of such hegemony, and to demonstrate against him would be to dramatize the issue against American policies in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world.
Jose Cardenas and a small but growing movement of young radicals object to the display of wealth in the homes of some of the richest men in Asia. next door to some of the worst slums in Asia. The shack streets of Manila, filled with squatters from the provinces, ruled by pistol-packing neighborhood bosses, are the mark of an underground economy where the minimum wage is only $1.50 a day. The young radicals put the blame on President Nixon as a symbol of what they call American colonialism. The Manila that President Nixon will see looks like a pleasant American capital, somewhere in the South, perhaps. The shopping district shows the signs of 70 years of American influence and dollars. But Manila is like its hundreds of jeepneys, little buses mounted on the frames of American Army jeeps. The machinery underneath is American, but the Filipinos have converted it to an Asian purpose. The result is more Asian than American.
There is still no word from the presidential party that a brief side trip to South Vietnam is planned, but in Saigon and at Cam Ranh Bay today, there were evidences that preparations were underway for a Nixon visit. In Bucharest, Romania, the National Communist Party is delaying the opening of its Congress for 2 days, according to a reliable source, to spare Mr. Nixon and foreign communist delegates any embarrassment.
What a good time. What a good time. What a good time for a cat. Catching sunbeams or dodging raindrops, looking for rainbows high on a hilltop, and suddenly, suspended in space, the top of the world is our special place where we play. Good time. The good taste of Kent was meant for a day like today.
Were good times invented for the good taste of Kent? All we know is wherever the good times are, millions of smokers are thinking, hey, what a good time for a Kent.
What a good time for a Kent.
Today's news from the moon, and it's all good. The Hornet, carrying the 3 astronauts in their sealed quarantine chamber, is approaching Hawaii. It gets there tomorrow, and then they will fly to Houston. The doctor, sealed in with them, says they're in good health. Neil Armstrong has a minor infection in one ear, but the doctor says there is no evidence the moon had anything to do with it. One of the boxes, filled with whatever the moon is made of, arrived by air at the Space Center in Houston. And so did the color films made on the moon. They'll be seen sometime this weekend. The box full of moon arrived with a police escort, flashing red lights, and traffic held back to let it pass. A report from NBC News correspondent John Dempsey.
The moon rocks, the most valuable cargo in history, arrived under heavy guard. They were flown to Houston ahead of the astronauts so scientists could begin studying them immediately. NASA officials were hard-pressed to put a price on them and finally just said they were priceless. The shipment was so valuable, the rocks were divided into 2 parts, and each was flown to Houston aboard its own cargo jet, just so there would be some rocks left over if one plane crashed. Inside the Lunar Receiving Lab, Space Agency cameras monitored the passage of the rocks through an airlock into the sterile quarantine area, where they will stay until NASA is sure they don't contain some germ that can't be cured. The first sample rocks contained about 20 pounds of rocks packed in a vacuum. Scientists want to keep the rocks in as close to moon condition as possible. So for the next few days, the rocks will be handled and photographed inside the vacuum chamber. Once the space agency is sure the rocks are germ-free, they will be parceled out. For 3 months, 142 investigators all over the world will study the rocks. There has never been another event like it in the history of science. John Dempsey, NBC News, Houston.
The prolonged Senate debate over President Nixon's proposed safeguard anti-ballistic missile system has created tensions on both sides. Today, tempers flared openly during sharp exchanges between Senator Fulbright, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and Senator Stennis, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. A report from contributing editor John Chancellor.
People have been saying that a fight between John Stennis and Bill Fulbright was inevitable, and it came today as Fulbright was talking about the anti-ballistic missile. Fulbright was commending freshman senators who were against the ABM, and he said they are not interested in being stooges of the military. At this point, John Stennis, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, rose trembling to his feet. And at this point, Fulbright realized that he had made a grave error in terms of the protocol of the Senate. He had implied that John Stennis of Mississippi was a stooge of the military. Fulbright said quickly, "I overspoke. I withdraw the word stooges." And Stennis said, "You can't withdraw it, Senator. You must apologize." And Fulbright said, "I apologize for using the word stooge." Stennis later let the tensions of weeks of debate on the ABM spill over into some hard language of his own. He said to Fulbright, "You've called names and made charges. You've been doing it for months. It is getting so senators are afraid to go on the Appropriations or Armed Services Committees, or they'll face these charges." Fulbright is using his own Foreign Relations Committee to delay a vote on the ABM. Next Wednesday, he and Senator Albert Gore will hold a day of secret hearings on communications, which means that there will not be any meaningful voting on the ABM until at least a week from now.
The human body, gifted with infinite possibilities of variation. It's hard to believe that this basic structure can fit itself into shapes so unique, so unlike. In short, we're all put together differently. But ordinary mattresses are all built the same, and they treat people as if they were too. There's one mattress, though, that's different. The Beauty Rest. It's made of separate, individually pocketed coils, so that it can give each part of your body the firm, individual support it needs, no matter how that part happens to be shaped. The Beauty Rest, made for every body, and made only by Simmons, with this in mind, that the human body is a perfect idea, but that no human body is perfect.
The Huntley-Brinkley Report continues, brought to you by Absorbine Junior for athlete's foot. It relieves itching and kills athlete's foot or fungus on contact.
Fungus ready, sir. Yeah, itch is ready, sir.
I want those athlete's foot flags between the enemy toes by nightfall. Now move out!
It's your first battle, kid.
Yeah, nothing to it. We got him scratching like crazy.
Oh, no. He's got Absorbing Junior. We've had it. Just no way to fight Absorbing Junior. It stops its fast, kills fungus on contact.
Chemical warfare. How low can you get?
Absorbing Junior, liquid or powder.
Communist ground fire downed an Army helicopter near the Cambodian border today, killing the 7 American and 2 South Vietnamese soldiers aboard. Ground action was light and scattered as the lull in the fighting continued. In the Mekong Delta, more troops of the 9th Infantry Division prepared to pull out of South Vietnam and return to the United States. A report from NBC News correspondent Kenley Jones.
The attempt to Vietnamize the war is continuing in the Mekong Delta with a series of turnovers of U.S. artillery fire support bases to the South Vietnamese. The latest is Fire Support Base Moore, the former headquarters of the 9th Infantry Division's 1st Brigade. In a brief ceremony, the American flag was lowered and replaced by the South Vietnamese colors. This is the 3rd fire support base this month turned over to the South Vietnamese 7th Division, which is assuming the duties of the U.S. 9th in the Delta. As soon as the ceremony was over, the guard was changed and the Americans began leaving the base, headed for a rear area where they will await redeployment to the United States. By the end of August, more than 11,000 9th Division soldiers are scheduled to be withdrawn from the Delta, leaving its defense largely in the hands of the South Vietnamese. The test of their ability to defend is yet to come. Kenley Jones, NBC News at Fire Support Base Moore in the Mekong Delta.
North and South Vietnamese negotiators at the Paris peace talks met separately today with French Foreign Minister Maurice Schumann. It marked the first high-level contact between the peace teams and the new government of President Georges Pompidou. David?
There is also a war in Laos, one the United States has managed to stay out of. It is attacked more or less frequently by Vietnam, the Laotians say, and today they accuse the North Vietnamese of slaughtering civilians. In trying to defend the country, the Laotian army has its problems. Here's a report from NBC News correspondent Bob Jones.
These are soldiers of the Royal Lao Army. They get paid about $10 a month and fight with about $10 worth of enthusiasm. Their morale is shattered this year because the fighting has continued into the rainy season. This royalist outpost, 15 miles north of the King's Palace in Luang Prabang province, was flattened by communist shells just 2 weeks ago. The royal soldiers show no signs of concern about a possible Pathet Lao ground attack or about more shellings by the North Vietnamese. There is not even one defensive position with sandbags. The United States underwrites much of the $35 million Laos will spend this fiscal year to keep 70,000 men under arms. The U.S. also provides special advisors, but neither money nor advice has overcome the Royal Lao soldiers' distaste for war and apathy about the political fortunes of the princes and the generals. Most of them would rather fish than fight. On one occasion, Royalist and Pathet Lao troops are reported to have stacked their rifles in the middle of battle and jointly jumped into a pond full of bullfrogs, which are a Laotian delicacy. The result of this one-sided apathy in which the North Vietnamese fight and the Laotians do not is that the road between the royal capital at Luang Prabang and the administrative capital of Vientiane has been cut off by the communists. This neutralist roadblock is about 10 miles north of Vientiane. Most of this war on the royalist side is fought from the air. These are Laotian Air Force T-28s taking off from Luang Prabang airfield, loaded with bombs. They are flown by Laotian pilots. All manner of American cargo planes carry supplies and troops to the forward battle zones. These were flying in relief of the royalist troops beaten out of the Mung Sui outpost by North Vietnamese regulars. The Western allies here predict that the communists will try to capture a large government city and set up left-leaning Army Colonel Duan as the true leader of the country's neutralists. If that happens, the United States will have to decide between pulling out and leaving this country to its eventual fate or increasing our already sizable military commitment. Bob Jones, NBC News, Luang Prabang, Laos.
If you're like me, you probably don't know a shock absorber from an intake manifold. All you know is the shock's under here somewhere to make riding a little better. What if you haul a lot of heavy loads? Or a lot of people? You can't expect an ordinary shock absorber like this one to keep you from bottoming, scraping, or fishtailing. You need something better. We make something better. Monroe Load Leveler Stabilizing Units. They go under here instead of shocks to make riding a little better for people who haul heavy loads, or a lot of people, or just a lot of extra horsepower. Monroe Load Levelers, front and rear. Well, now you know better.
Israeli warplanes attacked Egyptian military installations again today. Egypt claimed 3 planes were shot down. Israel denied it. Israeli warplanes also hit gun positions inside Jordan. The Labor Department reported that almost 1.5 million workers have won significant wage increases since the first of the year. Labor Secretary Schultz said he was disturbed by spiraling wage and price increases and warned that inflation won't last forever. Prices fell to another new low today on the New York Stock Exchange. The Dow Jones Industrials lost almost 8.5 points, and the value of an average share of common stock went down 41 cents. NBC News will have special coverage through the weekend of both President Nixon's trip and the return of the Apollo 11 astronauts. At 12:30 a.m. tomorrow, there will be live coverage of the President's arrival in Manila. At 9 a.m., NBC will cover the opening of the first batch of moon rocks in Houston. At 3 p.m. tomorrow, there will be coverage of the departure of the astronauts from the carrier Hornet. And at 2 p.m. Sunday, there will be a summary of the arrival of the astronauts in Houston and their entry into quarantine there. David?
3 years ago, Red China's Mao Zedong had not been seen in public for months, and there were reports in the West that he was sick. Apparently, this rankled and irritated him because suddenly and without explanation, the Chinese sent out newsreel films showing Chairman Mao swimming in a slightly ungainly way in the Yangtze River. Today was the 3rd anniversary of this, no doubt, great event, And to observe it, Chinese soldiers and civilians plunged into the river to celebrate. A report from NBC News reporter Bob Green.
July 16th was the third anniversary of Mao's supposed 9-mile swim in the Yangtze River when he was 72. People all over communist China have celebrated a now famous swim by their leader Mao Zedong by plunging in themselves. Joining in the nationwide swim-in were these soldiers, Red Guards, and working people in Canton. Army, Air Force, and Navy men paddled behind a huge poster of Mao. Others, pushing machine guns across, chanted, "Closely follow our great leader Chairman Mao forever and march forward courageously." But for some young people, it was simply a chance for a swim on a hot summer day. Bob Green, NBC News, Hong Kong.
It appeared that those carrying their little books, The Thoughts of Chairman Mao, got them wet. Good night, Chet.
Good night, David, and good night for NBC News.